And we're live. What's going on, sir?
Too much. How are you?
Good. What do you call it? I just I just had a wonderful time. I don't even know what made me think of it, but yesterday, oh, you know why? I saw a hysterical meme about a hysterical meme that I thought that Sam Chosak would love. Um, and I sent it to him. I hadn't spoken to him in months, maybe even more than months. And he responded with a good old haha, miss you, bud. And then and that was it. That was the extent of the conversation, and then ended with hey, by the way, I just started this podcast. I would love to get you on because I forgot that Sam had a radio show back in Binghamton, and he's got such a wonderful voice for podcasting and radio. Like
Yes.
he even has the face for it, by the way. Like that kind of like bushy beard, like roundish blue eyes. Like he's got like that look for like that look of someone that could sit around with a cigar and talk talk to you about things and know and sound intelligent. So so then he was the anti Michael about this all because I was like, you want to get on the podcast? He's like, sure. I'm like, how about in 20 minutes? He's like, okay. And then we talked for almost 2 hours. And the only reason why I got off was because it was 12:15. Um, and I started learning with someone in the mornings, um, and so I wanted to be responsible about that. So I went to bed. But I could have gone on for another little while. It was a lot of fun.
He always has interesting things to say, I feel like.
He does, but you really have to work hard to pull it out of him a lot. Not in a bad way, just a quiet kind of guy. And the way that he and I initially became friends to begin with was essentially me forcing him into our friendship. Right? We were in Hayes on Friday night, and it was one of my first weekends in Binghamton, and I saw that his room. The truth is, I've said this story so many times. I don't know whether I'm making up the story or whether I'm
Yeah.
or whether it's exactly accurate. But I remember for a fact that his door was ajar, but not open enough that you'd be like sure that he wanted to have guests, rolling through. So so I kind of like peeked my head in to see what's going on because my room was packed and crowded, and he was sitting there and he had some drinks and sodas and some like chips set out on his kitchen on his dining room table, and but he wasn't particularly like forthcoming or welcoming about it. And I was just like, let's talk, like what's your deal, dude? It's nice to meet you. I'm your new neighbor. And
Yeah.
I kind of like forced him into a conversation for like an hour, and then we became buddies. But I really had to work very hard to for a while to pull at him and find something that he was interested in talking about. So he opened up and was a little bit more loose with me just overall.
What is he up to?
He's actually brewing. At
He
he's a
sticking
brewer
with
at
it?
this. Yeah, he's sticking with it. But you know what? I don't know how he did it. He waited 2.5 years. He was working on the canning line of a brewery. Um, and for 2.5 years he put up with it until they gave him that position. And
It's dedication.
it is, but I wouldn't have the patience to wait 2.5 years, especially at a job like on the canning line. To canning line is literally like he's just watching machines can beer for 9 hour shifts at a time. It's like the most blue collar job that you can get nowadays, or one of them.
I've been listening to a lot of videos of Brendan Sanderson talking about writing, and one
Who's
of the
that?
things Brendan Sanderson is one of the most famous fantasy writers that are alive today.
Hmm. Okay.
And he is the most productive fantasy writer alive today because most of them take 10 years to come out with their next book, and he's coming out with like 3 books in a year,
So when
crazy
he
stuff
does
like
that,
that.
does he? Does he say that he has all three books concept fleshed out in advance and then just pounds it out?
Um, it depends. Like during COVID, he just pounded out 4 books and just like made one video being like,
Crazy.
I'm coming out with 4 books.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. I
Uh,
can't imagine. Okay. So what was
but
he saying when you're
he
watching?
he
Yeah.
he said that he used to work as like a front desk person at a hotel, I believe. And he
Mm-hmm.
was saying that that was like the best thing for his writing because like the mundane jobs where you don't have to like think too much, you can just like spend your time
Yeah.
thinking versus like jobs that take your like actual attention and thought, like being an accountant or being a teacher. Like you
Mm-hmm.
don't, it's like you're paid for thinking versus like more mundane
Yeah.
jobs where you're paid for like physical, like you
Labor.
still have freedom over your thoughts while you're at the job so you can spend your time writing or thinking about writing or like
Yeah.
there's the story of like Einstein like working at the post office to like figure out E equals MC squared, which I don't know if that's real or not, but the same idea, like the more mundane things are always the best way to come up with ideas.
Yeah, and additionally, I would imagine that you probably also get quite a bit of exposure to creative prompts and thoughts if you're working as a doorman. You know, I mean, you're getting a lot of exposure to a lot of different types of personalities and a lot of different odd scenarios all hours of the day. And I could just imagine that, you know, if you were interested in some kind of creative pursuit, you know, that, you know, something that has to do with the humanities, then that would probably be one of those things. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, you never lived on the Upper West Side, right? So when I was living in what's it called? That complex on 97th and Columbus, Park West
You
Village.
cut out for the last like 15 seconds after you asked about
When
the Upper West
yeah,
Side.
when I was there, I lived on in Park West Village. You know you remember that place on 97th and
No.
Columbus?
Okay. Yeah.
It was like those two big buildings that were like they range between like they take the space between 97th and 100 on Columbus. Um, and they were both doorman buildings. And the year I'd graduated, the entire Binghamton, you know, from 2016, 17, and like
Yeah.
going into 18, we're living in those buildings, right? Particularly the Jewish people. And you know, all hours of the day, you would walk into that place, and there would just be the most bizarre scenarios, you know, constantly. And I mean, if I just sat in that lobby and just, you know, did just wrote, you know, just observed, I would get a lot of great material, you know. Um,
I'm sure
but
at
so
a beer
yeah,
bottling, beer canning place, you probably also meet some interesting people.
yeah, but a little bit less so because you're working with the same crew, just in shifts, and then you go home.
Yeah, no, you you
If you
you
worked
you don't get the
if you worked in a
variety of
tap room,
people. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you probably get some cool stories and some cool experiences and stuff like that, you know. But I don't know if it's necessarily the same. So what's been going on? What's new with you?
Uh, nothing too much. I don't know. When was the last time we spoke?
I think we spoke right. I think we spoke right before Deadpool and Wolverine came out. So let's say you know
Well,
let's say late June, early July.
I'm just trying to think if we spoke since I went on my honeymoon or not.
Yes, we did. We talked about Banff a little bit.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, we talked
So.
about how wonderful that was. I had a really scary and not a little traumatizing experience this morning. Um, my brother-in-law just just a month ago at 17 years old got diagnosed with epilepsy,
Hey,
and
sorry to hear that.
yeah, and it was crazy. And what's interesting is that he's had three seizures. All of them happened under the same circumstance around the same time, which was prior to something, you know, big going on, either in school or, you know, or school or work or whatever. And he didn't sleep a lot the previous night. And so he slept 4 or 5 hours and he tried to get up and operate in the morning. So this morning I was getting up and I was about to walk out of the house. It's probably 7 o'clock, 7:15, and I pushed the button for the coffee machine. I'm talking to him. I'm having a conversation about how it's his first day of senior year, and it's for and I was like, and I was like, yeah, you're gonna get one chance at first impressions as a joke because he's already been with these people for 4 years, and and I push the button for the coffee, and he's in the bathroom, and I just hear a crash, and I go and I go and I just see him on the floor, and I mean the whole thing lasted probably 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. It felt like a lifetime, and dude, it was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had in my entire life. I mean, I walked away from it shaking, like I felt that I haven't had one of those adrenaline rushes where my body and my brain comprehend that something super serious and super dangerous is happening at the exact same moment, and
Yeah.
I got flooded with it, and I held him, I turned him sideways, and I picked, I held him over, I picked his head up, um, but it's it was really it is really one of the scariest things that's ever happened that I've ever experienced, um,
Is that an
and
underlying thing, or is it just like a seizure disorder? Or do they not know?
I don't think they
Or
know
you don't
yet
have to
because
say
it's
if it's
so.
sensitive, but
No, no, no. I don't know. It's so new. I don't think they know. I do know that there is a correlation between a lack of sleep and the onset of of a seizure, meaning the people in general. You don't even have to be epileptic, but to run very low on sleep apparently causes it. And then
that part doesn't surprise me too much. Yeah.
no, but I mean, so apparently, from my understanding, apparently the way that seizures work is a seizure is your neurons, I think, are overfiring, right? Uh, and they're firing too quickly, and then your brain kind of spasms almost. Um, in my non-professional, non-medical understanding of it, right? I would
Yeah.
imagine that if you're exhausted and you haven't slept, that your brain wouldn't be overstimulated, unless I don't know.
I think you would probably have less control over the signals. Like whatever the stop gate is wouldn't be working as well, would be my guess.
Oh,
If that's the
interesting.
mechanism to cause it, I would guess that you don't have as much control over the gatekeeping mechanism.
Right, right. So maybe that's what it is.
But I don't know much about seizures. The one thing I do know is that there's this book that I have. What is it called? I have it right over here. I can find the name. I haven't read it yet. I've had it on my bookshelf for like a year now. Brain Energy, uh,
Okay. Oh, I feel like I've heard of that.
by
Who?
Christopher Palmer. He's a Harvard, I think psychiatrist. Yeah,
Hmm.
psychiatrist. Uh,
Okay.
and he's very big on using diet for psychiatric diseases.
Yes.
On
Is
the
he an advocate of
basis,
keto?
he is. Yeah, you probably heard him on the Huberman podcast.
You know what?
He
It's
he
so
was
funny that
on
you
there.
say that. I didn't, but Huberman has this awesome new. I used it. It was so easy and so intuitive, and I'm not like a techie kind of guy by any stretch of the imagination. My actual, I accidentally uploaded a picture of Zach Alexander to iTunes for somehow, and like the permanent face of this podcast is now Zach Alexander's face, and I don't know how to change it. Is how little techie I am, right? So if you go to like podcasts for the Apple app, then you like look up this podcast. It's just a picture of Zach Alexander smiling really close up. Um, but
Tons of views.
I hope so. I've only been sharing the Spotify link, dude, because I'm like, I don't know what, I don't want anyone finding this on the wrong platform. But, but I went on, I went on it, and there was quite a bit of information, and so it's basically search. It's basically frequently asked questions or type your own question on or or a search option, and it searches the archives of all his podcasts and all his interviews with AI, and then forms answers and information, and then we'll actually recommend and offer other suggested questions and follow-ups to help your case.
Interesting. That's pretty cool.
So one of the things that happened was I looked up epilepsy on that, and one of the big things was and there was two things. CBD apparently the parts of your brain that the neurons that are overfiring, that's CBD. I don't know if it
That
stabilizes
makes
it.
sense to me because CBD I've heard is good for like Parkinson's as well
Yes,
because it
yes.
like relaxes the muscles, I
And I
guess, or
think
something
I
like that.
think I think Parkinson's is oh, no.
It
Parkinson's, the
seems
dementia
it
part
seems
is a
similar.
decay. The Parkinson's is the decay of your neurons, right? The neuroplasticity,
I
which
think
is
specifically the myelin sheath from what I remember,
hmm
which is
okay.
like the part that covers the neurons
hmm So
and like
so
insulates them.
yeah, yeah. But I also know that there was a little bit of work recently into researching for forms of dementia like Parkinson's using small to medium doses of psychedelics because the psychedelics stimulate the same parts of your brain that the same neurons that are decaying as a result of dementia get reactivated, um, or not reactivated but get strengthened and turned on from taking these, any kind of dose of any kind of psychedelic. So, so apparently, there's initial stages. And it's not being done in the U.S., but there is some trials being done abroad. Um, and by the way, these trials have been going on. I'm reading a book about this now. These trials have been going on since like the 30s. Or there's been
Well,
very
yeah,
limited trials, but
a lot of trials were limited in the U.S. because of the legality status.
hmm
A lot of
yeah.
them.
Which also, by the way, the basis of the legality status and the whole conversation apparently is also extremely shaky, and and stemmed because the Nazis initially were leading the research because the Swiss invented LSD, and then not around I think around 38 or 39, and then and then by the early 40s, the Nazis were trying to figure out tools to find like a truth serum, um, or like some kind, they were using it on people. But one of the things that they noticed, aside from being able to get the truth from people, was that people seemed extraordinarily happy and free and one with the world and one with nature, and and they seemed to have like these long-standing positive effects. So the Nazis would take LSD and mescaline, I think, and they would actually give it to people that were in psychiatric wards at the time, and a lot of those people were depressed or anxious or whatever, things that we certainly wouldn't stick people in psychiatric, wards for today anymore. Um, and they also noticed this enormous, alleviation from those diseases or from those symptoms, and a remission completely. And then they lost the war, and then America through Project Paperclip, which was recruiting, a lot of, or bringing over a lot of top Nazi intelligence because they didn't want Russia to get access to all of the Nazis' information. They would bring over all these Nazi scientists and study their work. And then they actually started introducing LSD into the American scene as well, with the San Francisco in the 60s. So all of this stuff was like, so all this stuff has been around and studied for decades more than we think. It's just kind of been, on the DL, you could say,
Yeah. Also, when science was probably less ethical and a little less rigorous. But the thing that I heard from Chris Palmer was that epilepsy, like you said, it's very similar, or at least one of his hypotheses is that it works very similar to a lot of psychiatric illnesses in that he was talking about how like the keto diet can help epilepsy. There's like a significant amount of evidence that a keto diet can help prevent seizures for people who have epilepsy.
yeah.
Um, and he was using that as a basis to look at diet for psychiatric meds because a lot of
What
seizure
other, what
meds
other,
is
what other,
off-label in psychiatry.
Right. So what do you call it? What other diseases does he look at? Or you don't know yet?
I know that one thing is schizophrenia, which he does make sure to say that like you still have like you're not gonna do it
Yes, of
instead of
course.
medicine. Um, you're gonna do it as an adjunct with medicine, but apparently he's seen good stuff with that. I haven't read the book yet though, but I think he goes through a whole slew of different psychiatric disorders, and not all of them are like he doesn't recommend full keto for all of them necessarily.
Sure.
Um, but that's just what I got from the podcast
I don't know that
that he was on.
I don't know that full keto is necessarily proven for the average person to be the healthiest diet.
It's not sustainable. You can do it for a certain amount of time, but from what I
What do
understand, it's not
do you know the rules of
sustainable.
keto? I don't know what's considered keto friendly or not.
It's basically no carbs, no carbohydrates at all. A lot of
Really?
a very fatty diet.
Very fatty diet, specifically fatty.
Yeah, because you basically get you
So
increase
what's
your
fatty?
fat,
You can
decrease
get
your
fish is fatty, avocado's fatty, eggs isn't
like
very fatty.
meat. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
it's
Sorry.
not as much about increasing those. Just it's a no carb diet, so you naturally
Yeah. And
like
then
if you're not
apparently
gonna
it's
have
also
carbs, so you have a whole steak and potatoes or something like that. Or I guess maybe not
it,
potatoes.
yeah, I was gonna say not the potatoes part. Steak and broccoli or steak and I
Yeah,
don't know,
steak and
something.
broccoli. As you can tell,
Yeah.
I'm not quite a keto diet person, but I wouldn't look at
No,
that
me neither.
potatoes.
I think I could actually be pretty good about I don't think I really need carbs. Um, I probably, oh man, on a daily basis, I eat eggs and cottage cheese in the morning. I eat tuna or salmon or maybe some other kind of form of, cheese or something like that in the, for lunch. And then I eat chicken and rice or meatballs and rice or hamburgers, with some kind of vegetable and a side. Um, I really don't consume a lot of carbs in general. Oh, except for beer, dude. In that case,
That
and it,
catches you up to me.
and even then, by the way, for probably 2 years, I was convinced. Like I'd be like, I'm only gonna drink, the beers. Like, if I'm gonna drink one beer a day, right? Like I'm gonna drink a strong beer that's gonna get me that's heavier. It's like 8 or 9% alcohol or more, because you got a double IPA that's stronger. Then you got a stout that's 10, 11, 12, 13% easy, and
Sounds disgusting, Swabble.
I was like, oh yeah, I could totally, that's totally it's just one beer, just one beer. And then I found out, I was like, dude, there's so much sugar and there's so much crap in here. And then there's a brewery here in Fort Lauderdale called Uncommon Paths, and they make delicious beer, really excellent beer, but they have the calories per pour in it,
That's a bold
and
move. I respect that.
it's a
You don't
crazy
have to
move,
give
dude.
that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the
Definitely.
craziest laws in my opinion, but that's another story. But
Is that in general or is that for beer?
for alcohol, any alcoholic
Mm.
product, you don't have to give any nutritional facts. Even if it
Right.
has like it could have bacon in it, you don't have to put any
Yeah.
ingredients in.
Yeah. 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 And plenty, by the way, there are beers that put bacon in it. So,
I'm not
the,
surprised.
anyway, so I go to the brewery and I order a 4 ounce pour of it, and I look at the menu and it's 430 calories in that one pour. And I'm like, this is why I'm not losing, like, even though I'm having a beer, a couple, like 3 or 4 beers a week. The reason I'm gaining weight is because a Bud Light has 100 calories, and this 4 ounce pour has 450 calories, and and it's so much worse for me. It's crazy. I didn't realize.
4 ounces, 450 calories is more than I would have guessed.
Well, because what you have to do is you have to put in a lot of sugar in order to get the alcohol content up that high, right?
Yeah,
Because yeah, in order for it, because you put in sugar into the base of the beer, and then the yeast eats, or the sugar eats itself, or the sugar and yeast eat themselves. I forgot exactly how it works, but the point is that the sugar converts to ABV. Um, and so if you want like an IPA, if you make a regular IPA and you just put in, regular amount of sugar, I don't know what a regular, whatever dose of sugar, and you're like, you know what, this IPA would be really cool if it was 8% or 12% or 10%, and you just dump in another bag of sugar or bags of fruits or bags of purees, and all the sugar in there eats itself up. Did you ever have Sam Trosak's mead back in Binghamton?
I did not, no.
He would make his own honey wine, his own mead, and he explained the whole process to me a bunch of times. And the way that he would use, I think he would either use honey, or he would even like make like he called it applejack, which was he basically just fermented any standard apple juice, right? He's like, there's so much sugar in here that he just fermented it, and it would show, and then after a month it would turn into this 10, 12%, 15%, apple juice wine, right? Or apple, sweet alcoholic apple juice. And then what he would also do, in order to, if he wanted to get it at a higher ABV, closer to 20 or 25%, he would actually put it in the freezer, and then he would let it defrost upside down with the cap open. So the first drops that would come out, because alcohol has a lower freezing temperature, as a high, higher freezing temperature, I don't know, one of the two. Um, excuse me. He would so with the stuff that would drip out was the most concentrated with alcohol, and then he would leave the rest of it, and you end up throwing away like three quarter, half the bottle, or a third of the bottle, but the stuff that you had left was, instead of being 10, 12, 15%, it was 20, 25%.
There's a person, I don't know if you've ever seen on social media, who does something like that. Like he takes Mountain Dew and like makes Mountain Dew mead and stuff like that.
Oh my
Like he
gosh,
just
can't
like
imagine
puts
it's good.
yeast in Mountain Dew and lets it ferment for like 2 months or something like that. And
Yeah,
he takes
yeah.
like
I
all
mean, it
these random
works.
things and says like, "Can I turn it into alcohol?" And the answer is always
Yeah.
yes, but
The answer is always yes. I think soda really scares me the most, though. I think out of any like product, it's funny because the other week I was in the I was in the office at work, and one of the coworkers' name is Richard, um, and he had a box of Entenmann's on his desk, and this guy's a toothpick of a guy. He's like, no matter what, like he doesn't eat a lot, but he has the kind of figure, and I suspect that even if he did eat like crap, he probably would stay skinny. He
yeah.
has a fast metabolism. So he had this box of Entenmann's on his desk, and he was like, "You want some?" And I was like, "Dude, if if I'm gonna poison myself, I want to get drunk or high from it." I was like, "I'm not poisoning myself for an Entenmann, for a prepackaged Entenmann donut that's been sitting on a supermarket shelf for a year and a half, you know." Um,
Entenmann's, I
but
don't know if I agree. Some other ones maybe, but Entenmann's are delicious.
if you,
Especially
yeah, but
the
they're not
chocolate
a
chip
donut.
cookies. Mm.
Yeah, but
No,
they're not what you're gonna go
even
for.
the donuts, I don't know. I have like nostalgia, I feel like, for the donuts. I have a sweet spot in my
Right.
heart for
So
the
you're
donuts.
not eating them because they're the better donuts than Krispy Kreme.
They're not, yeah, they're not better than Krispy Kreme, but when someone brought them to school for like a party or something like that because it was someone's birthday, then it was a fun
Yeah, of
time.
course. I had a friend. I had a friend, Jason Fishman, whose mom would bring donuts to all, not only for the whole class every time it was one of her kids' birthdays, but all the other kids that were also in school with them. She'd bring donuts for the other grades too, like whoever was associated with her family by extension on any given birthday. The entire class would get donuts. It was
With
right.
the
It was
Entenmann's.
great. Yeah, it was always Entenmann's.
See, it's got the
Yeah.
nostalgia factor for me. But Entenmann's chocolate chip cookies, I'll die on that hill. Those things are delicious, at least for the first the first 12 hours after you open them, and then they go bad after that.
No, they don't. There's no way to go back after 12
No,
hours.
they start going stale after like a day or two.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
yeah,
they're
yeah.
like they're not nearly as good if you leave them open for over a day.
Have you ever had European bread before, or European pastries? I guess even Israel
Like
might count,
ever?
but
Yeah.
yeah, when my wife and I were on our honeymoon, we were in Greece, and we're on these little islands, and there's no kosher food around. But going to a bakery and just get like a bakery that would just make bread all day, and just like these fresh loaves of bread, and we ate a ton of bread on that trip, and we never really felt yucky from it. Like it was lighter, it was airier. It didn't feel like we were shoving. Like it didn't feel heavy. Like if you eat, you know, like a bunch of hot dog buns or a baguette from Costco in America. Like me too, dude. It's such a shame that it's not good for you because I really, really love bread.
That's
I
why
love
I can't
warm
do the
bread with
keto
butter.
diet.
Mm.
That's one thing I'll never think too much about if it's bad for me or not. I'll just, especially if it's
Do you
fresh
like
baked
what do you think
bread,
of
I'll
pumpernickel
just,
bread? Do you like pumpernickel?
I don't love pumpernickel, but
Wh-
baguettes,
Oh, I
focaccia,
love the guts. Yeah, dude.
mm,
Yeah,
pita,
yeah.
challah,
Fresh pita, dude. Fresh pita.
fresh
I mean, like
pita, mm,
it's like it's like a pillow, dude. It's like a pillow that you take out of a dryer. That's
and
literally
then
what.
you eat it.
And then you eat it, and you feel happy about it. Like it's always incredible. It's always great. Have you been working any new cooking stuff, new recipes, new cooking stuff that you're playing around with?
Um, Not soon. I will be more. I feel like we got an ice cream machine.
No way.
We
How does
finally.
it? Are those things worth it? Are those things
I
like
mean,
are worth?
we haven't used it yet, so that's why we got. The first thing I want to make is
Was it from
cinnamon
your
bun
wedding
ice
registry?
cream. It was from our wedding registry,
Yeah, no one buys those things if it's not in the registry. You know, I don't know
but we
anyone.
finally like have it like unpacked and like ready to go.
So how do you make cinnamon bun ice cream?
I don't know, but I'm gonna find out.
Yeah,
But at one time, I remember before Ben and Jerry's got canceled. Uh,
just by the Jewish world,
Randy,
but yeah.
yeah, just by the Jewish world. Um, but Randy, for one of my birthdays, we had a meat meal, and she found part of Ben and Jerry's cinnamon bun ice cream.
Nice.
Even even being non-dairy, it was so good. I've never seen it in stores since. I would still buy it if I saw it, even if it's Ben and Jerry's. I don't care.
So I've
It was
seen,
so good.
yeah, yeah. So for a couple of years, I don't remember who the brand was, but I do remember it was one of the Ben and Jerry pint-sized box, containers. I don't remember if it was Ben and Jerry or not, but my mom would also buy like two or three of them for the weekends,
They have a
and
lot of non-dairy options.
they do, and they're all and they're really really good. And I think we're used to non-dairy ice cream tasting exactly like how you would imagine it would taste, you
Yeah.
know. um, but
It's
they I mean, yeah, you
the
can get really
the
high quality.
non-dairy cheese is not up there, but the non-dairy ice cream is getting pretty good.
Yeah, plus I don't know what the heck that cheese is made out of. That always stresses me out a little bit. The closest I've ever come to shitting in my pants was from a tofu all vegan place in the city. I went with my sister.
That's interesting.
This was years ago. We were just walking around the city, and I mean, I I must have been 21 or 22, and my sister and I were walking through Manhattan. We both love to walk, especially up in like through the city. Um, and we just went in. I think we went in for something, and then both of us were done pretty quickly, either meeting up with someone or appointment or something. And we were both done pretty quickly. And we were just walking up and down the street. And we decided to get a bite from this tofu place or this vegan place that she'd heard of. I think she was in Stern at the time,
Is she vegan?
and no, no. She just heard that it was good. That she heard there was a cool menu, and there's all these cool kind of because a lot of these foods sound really like the names sound really cool and all these cool ingredients and all these cool combinations of things that you're not really used to seeing together, especially in kosher restaurants. And so we went in, we both got food. We look at each other while we're eating. We're like, like it doesn't make any sense to us how this is vegan or how this is, like whatever. But it's pretty good. and we're walking back uptown, and my stomach just drops, and and I always have anxiety, especially in Manhattan, about not having a bathroom because I feel I'm afraid I'm not comfortable. I'm not the kind of guy that just walks into a random bar or pizza shop and like runs to the bathroom and runs out, right? Um,
See, you wouldn't think that I'd be that type. I could definitely do that. I have done that.
yeah, dude, it stresses the heck out of me. I feel like I'm doing something wrong for some reason. Like
Okay, finish your story first, but then I've got a story for you.
so 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 my stomach drops and I'm thinking to myself, where's the nearest bathroom? And that I'd be comfortable going to. I feel comfortable going to a Barnes and Noble bathroom. I feel like that's like, open for everyone, but
Yeah.
and then I just Googled what was near us and an AMC popped up. I think it was on what's the one on the Upper West Side at 72nd Street maybe, I think. And
Been a while. There's one, I want to say like 68th, maybe, and 86th. I don't know. I don't remember. Near Lincoln
yeah,
Center,
so
there's
oh
one.
yeah, you know what it was? You know what it was? I was at Barnes and Noble, which is on I think 80th or 79th, and I had to and the AMC was on 78 or whatever 86th, and I you can't run because if you run you're gonna crap yourself, and if you can't take too long because if you take too long you're gonna crap yourself, and I'm just doing like this hobble, like this fast hobble, like clenching, like up, 7, 8 blocks and a couple avenues over. And I went to the bathroom and the guy's like, "You have a movie ticket?" I'm like, "Dude, I just need to get to the bathroom, man, like right now." And he was like, "Okay, fine, go ahead." and but that was it's like where you
There are
just
probably
barely.
1,000 places you could have stopped on the way.
There's literally, by the way, literally 1,000 places, and because I have this block, I don't know what it is. I would literally rather shit my pants than stop in a pizza shop and like say, can I use your bathroom?
That's interesting. I
I
would
don't
think
know.
you'd be the last person to be like
I
that.
know, I know. It's a little contradictory to my personality, but it's not really because I'm really more comfortable. I'm only comfortable around people that I'm comfortable with. So, or at least
Fair.
until I'm given some kind of sense that everything is clear and that there's no danger socially or otherwise. And otherwise, like, if I'm at a bar or I'm at a brewery or I'm at a cigar lounge and I'm sitting there and there's someone next to me, if they don't say hi to me first, all they have to do is just look at me and say hi. That's all they got to do, right? If they don't say hi, I could sit there for 3 hours and not say a word to them. The second that I get that opening, the second that I get that initial hello, okay. This guy's not this guy, this woman, this person's not a threat. This person wants to engage. I'm happy to talk to them, and I go in. I just dive into it. But I have such a hard time taking that first step, and I don't even know why it is. It's just, but it just, it's kind of the way I work. So I guess this is like that on steroids because it's not only am I not sure how you're gonna respond to me, but I'm going into your establishment that's serving patrons only, and I'm not. I feel like I'm doing something wrong.
I mean, you may be depending on their policy, but my
Yeah, but
my
most of the time
my
they don't even care.
my story was I was on like a travel group trip to Europe, and I was in England. Um,
When was this? How long ago was this?
this was the year before I was a freshman in Binghamton.
So you were a senior in high school?
It was like between the summer between.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, and I, it was the day before Tisha B'Av, which is obviously a fast day. Um,
25-hour fast. Yeah.
yep. So I was drinking a ton of water because
Yeah.
like we were walking all day. The next day, like we'd be traveling, like we were still doing stuff. So I was drinking a ton of water, and we were like walking around, and it was a Saturday, so it was Shabbat.
Yeah.
And we were just like walking around. We were in like the train station where there's platform 9 3/4, and I'm just chugging water. And I didn't think about the fact that I'd really have to pee when you drink like a ton of water one after another.
Sure.
Um, and
Being young and
apparently,
naive and not being old and having to pee every 10 minutes like me.
yes.
Okay.
So apparently you have to pay for the bathrooms in the subway
Yes.
station in England. Like at least the one that I went was in England. So it was Shabbat, so I didn't have any money on me. Even if I did,
Oh
I
my
couldn't like
gosh.
pay for a bathroom because that would be
Ugh,
breaking
it's such
Shabbat.
a bad feeling.
My cousin was also on the trip, and he escorted me as we like ditched the group, which I don't even know if we were allowed to do, and we were just running around trying to find a bathroom. I eventually just like ran into a restaurant, right? Didn't even like stop to ask anyone, just ran straight past them to the bathroom and peed.
It's so funny. Yeah. 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 Dude, it's such a bad feeling. When you have, I have a, I have my buddy of Rummy has, we call it a Rummy tummy, although whenever he's in a situation like where he doesn't know where the bathroom is, he, his stomach will get all knotted up and he'll have to go to the bathroom. And, and
I can relate to that.
Totally, totally, totally. I mean, it's a real thing. And I was like, dude, I was like, you know, you got to do. He's like, what? I was like, you got to go to therapy. I was
Dude,
like, you got to figure this shit
it's
out, man.
I have the
And he
same
has been,
thing,
and it
but with
works.
peeing.
Yeah, I do too. So that,
Wherever I'm like, I don't know where I'm gonna pee next, I'm always like, okay, I just went to the bathroom an hour ago, but I already have to pee.
yeah, yeah. I don't look forward to, I don't look forward to that because I mean, I'm 28 and a half, almost 29, yikes. And and I mean, I, I probably, I mean, I drink, to be fair, I drink a lot of water before I go to bed because my toothpaste always makes my mouth super dry. But, the, I'll wake up two or three times in a night to pee. Um, and it's such a miserable feeling when you wake up and you know that you got to go, that you know that you only have X amount of more hours to sleep and you're like, I hope it doesn't take me a long time to go back to sleep after I pee. And you don't want to turn on the light, but like, you're not sure what to do about it. And, the whole thing is just a nightmare, dude.
Uh,
Uh,
I need to pee in the middle of the night. Thank God. Like I definitely had a period where I was like waking up every night. Like I get like bursts where I wake up every night in the middle of the night to pee, but for the most part, I've been pretty good now because we're talking about it. I feel like it'll happen more often, but yeah, I
that's
always
right.
go with the light off. But the one thing that I've learned that's helped me a lot is just like I used to always sleep with a watch and I would always like look at my watch to see what time I woke up, which is a terrible
Yes.
idea. I take
hmm
my watch off and I will not look at the time. I will just wait for my alarm to
Yes.
go
So I
off.
stopped
Like,
doing that too, by the way. If I wake up in the middle of the night, unless I'm having a nightmare, I don't look at my phone. And the reason, and I don't, yeah, because I don't want to know the time, and B, it keeps me up, you know.
well, phone
Um,
is even worse. Sleep
Phone's way worse.
psychologists and sleep scientists say you shouldn't even have your phone in your bedroom. Like even for an
Really,
alarm, they say the phone should be out of the bedroom entirely.
it makes what difference would it be if the phone was in the room or not?
So it's a couple of things. So, I mean, you could instinctively grab for it. You could go on social media before you go to bed. You could just like, some people don't keep their phones on silent. Some people keep their phones face up so that it lights up every time you get a notification. And then that
Yeah.
lights up the room, and any light in the room is going to disturb your sleep.
Is really any light in the room? Actually, my wife and I have been arguing about this quite a bit because she likes the room to be pitch black when you go to bed. So she'll close all the shades. But the problem is that I really my whole day feels different. If I wake up in the morning and the room is bright, and the room is like filled with like sunlight or natural light, I will be rejuvenated and quick to get up and like even if I didn't have the best night of sleep, like I will be operational and be able to pop myself out of bed. When I wake up and the room is when I wake up and I can't tell whether it's 4 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, it just throws me off. It's the worst thing for me, you know. So we keep on going back and forth because at my parents' house where we were the last couple of months, the lights to the house my dad put lights on the outside of the house, and it was right outside our bedroom window. So and I actually grew up like that. I had this tiny little crappy shade that did not do a good job even a little bit. Like the whole shade would turn yellow at night because there was a light right outside. My room was always just bright. Um, you know, but I was always able to sleep through other distractions. And when I was in camp, I was in sleepaway camp. I was a staff member. I was a sports staff is what they called it. I'd kind of just float around and just help, whatever kids were playing, whatever sports. I'd referee or I'd coach or I'd do whatever. I just like
Yeah.
kind of just my day would revolve around that. And then with obviously at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock every day, we were just free to do whatever we want. And guys and people would stay up. The guys in the bunk, it was a shared staff bunk. The guys would stay up to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning every day. They'd be grilling and they'd be playing music and they'd be hanging out. And I would go to my lower bunk and I would just get in my bed and I would just pass out with the lights on and the music blasting and people grilling in the bunk. Like they had like a George Foreman. And that George Foreman was the George Foreman grill was started by George Foreman the boxer?
Yes.
You did know that? I didn't know that, dude.
Who else did you think did it?
I don't know. I just thought it was a really cool coincidence.
I think he was in the
Uh,
commercials growing up, like when people actually watched commercials.
yeah, now we listen to them. But I watched the movie Big George Foreman on Netflix, um, which
I
I
didn't
really
know
did
he
not
had a
like.
movie.
Yeah, it was pretty awful, honestly. And I mean, like it was a gallant effort. You could tell. You could tell they really like they covered an enormous amount of ground in his life, but they covered a lot of really big moments without any kind of significant buildup or any kind of valuable, like any kind of character development or creating any kind of connection with the audience that they just weren't interested. I wasn't interested in what was going on. Every moment kind of felt rushed, and but I was just looking into who he was. I knew he was a fighter, but I didn't know what his story was. So I was just Wikipediaing him, and it was like, oh, his boxing career, and then it was talking about George Foreman grills, and I was like, no way, this is the man behind the grill. That was so cool.
Oh,
But
see.
I know, I'm uncultured. I don't know what I could do about it. But yeah,
I'm not cultured either, but I know that George Foreman was the one who
either
made
George
George
Foreman is
Foreman
George Foreman.
grills.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that one and two I put together.
But I was always, I never had a very difficult time sleeping through things.
The
And I
thing
guess,
is, you may even be able to sleep through it, but I mean, first of all, your sleep does get worse the older you get, even if we're both not that old. But also, from what I understand, even if you like are sleeping, your sleep quality may be hurt if you like look on like sleep measures, like objective sleep measures of like looking at your deep wave sleep, your slow wave sleep, like
right.
it'll be a little messed up if you're like sleeping in the light or like in noisy
Do you
environment.
ever measure the quality of your sleep? Do you keep track of it?
So I've been debating getting an Aura ring if you've heard of those.
Yeah, I have. I don't know.
They
I
can
don't
be
know
your
much.
first sponsor for the podcast.
Yeah, sure. They track you. They track your sleep, right?
They track, yeah, and like they track that and a couple of other things, but it's like apparently the most accurate one for like non-research purposes from what I understand.
How
Um
much are they expensive? Are they priced
it,
prohibitive?
it's like $300, I want to say, so depends on your budget.
Yeah.
My main thing is like I'm sure I can convince a bunch of people to combine for a gift for my birthday or something like that, but
If you want me
like
to throw in a couple of bucks, I'm more than happy to.
I feel like thank you. I feel like it will just like stress me out more of like, oh no, like it gives you a sleep score. So like anything like 90 and above is good. So I'm sure I'd be like, oh no, I got a sleep score of 62 last night. Now my whole day is going to be like
Yeah,
messed.
yeah. I
Like
bet that happens.
I had a period of time where I was doing that a lot and I'm trying my best to like, that's why I took my watch off. Like I don't want to know. I was like calculating like, oh, I only got 5.5 hours of sleep, and then like there were days where like, especially when I'd have to wake up the next day at like 3:30 to catch a plane or something like that, I just
Hmm.
would not be able to fall asleep the night before because I'd be so stressed of like, oh man, it's 11 o'clock. I gotta wake up at 3:30. I gotta get to sleep right away. And then I'd be
Yeah.
like up all night and not get a wink of sleep. And
But
then I
don't you
would be
also
screwed up the
find,
next day.
but don't you, do you also get that adrenaline rush from waking up and having to make that flight? I get a crazy adrenaline rush in the mornings of flights, you know? And I'll generally crash later, even on the plane, even just a couple hours later. But I'll actually be at a really high level of performance when I'm initially when I wake up on the morning of a flight, and if it's an early morning flight, there's almost no chance I'm getting a good night's sleep, you know.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I still function very well.
part of that is your natural circadian rhythm, which like even if you've noticed like you've probably stayed up nights for like Shavuos, which is a Jewish holiday where a lot of Orthodox Jews stay up for the night learning.
Yeah.
So if you notice, you usually like have a dip around like 3, 4 a.m. where you're like falling asleep during like classes. And
Hmm.
then when you get to like 7 a.m. or like you're done with the day and you're going home to sleep, you're like, wow, I could stay up for another couple of hours. You get another like second wind. And
Yeah. I
that's
actually
because
I would get more of
you're
that.
naturally going to get that with your
I would
circadian
get
rhythm.
Yeah. What's that? Is that just from processing? But that I thought that's also based on an association with the fact that it's light outside, and generally speaking, when you're coming home and there's daylight, especially because it's summertime usually for that holiday, um, the fact like the daylight also affects your like the sunlight also affects your rhythm, right, and your internal clock, and
A
that's part
bunch
of
of
what throws you off.
different things. Yeah, a bunch of different things affect the clock. Light is one of the biggest things to tune it, but it's not necessary. Like if you are inside all day, like your circadian rhythm will still be functioning. It may get like a little funky, but as long as you're eating the normal times, sleeping normal times, like you'll keep
Hmm.
a fairly decent, like it's not the only thing that's needed. If you don't get light, like people who are blind, um, usually take like melatonin to help them sleep, but they have somewhat of a circadian rhythm. It may not be as strong as someone who has light. So it's not like the determining factor, but it's the biggest one.
And my understanding also is that even if you are blind, that your eyes are still receiving that sun are still receiving sunlight to a certain extent, right? Like you're like
I think you're right. I don't know enough to say for sure. There may be different types of blindness, but I think you're right.
yeah, because I think it's more about the actual contact. Like it's not necessarily about the seeing as much as it is about the contact with your skin and your body that you pick that your body's processing, not just like your ability to, oh, now it's light, now it's dark, but like there's actual like receptors
Yeah,
that are triggered from
there are
sunlight.
photoreceptors that are light sensitive that are involved in the process.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so you'll always you have two different systems working on you that make you feel tired and awake. One of them is your circadian rhythm, which is just a 24-hour cycle that's not based on whether or not you get sleep. And then there's another homeostatic pressure system, is what it's called in fancy terms, which is when a chemical called adenosine builds up in the brain. Um, and the more that that builds up, the sleepier that you get, and it doesn't dissipate until you're asleep. So
And once you fall asleep,
once you fall
then it
asleep,
empties out.
then it yeah kind of empties out. I'm not like an expert in it, but that's like the basic
Sure.
explanation. So like when like coffee works by blocking adenosine, so it builds up, but you don't feel like the effects of it.
Oh, that's so
So
interesting.
it continues to build, but you don't feel as if like it's
Is that why if
building.
you're tired enough and you drink coffee, it doesn't you could still feel tired, but you just can't sleep?
Yeah, so it's not, from what I understand, it's not gonna like dissipate any of the adenosine. It's just going to stop it from accumulating more. And that's why when
Yeah.
the caffeine wears off, then all of that adenosine that was building up is going to all of a sudden flood in. So you're going to feel more tired and
Right.
need more
Right.
caffeine.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
you're going
you
to
don't
have a
drink coffee,
crash at
right?
some point. Coffee really messes me up. I had coffee like 2 weeks ago, and I mean, maybe it was the mixture of having coffee and not getting sleep, which I mean is basically always going to be a mixture, I feel like. But I was so nauseous after eating Friday night dinner like 2, 3 weeks ago, and I think it was because I drank coffee. Like 1 cup, not even
Really?
a full cup of coffee. It was like
Is it because you're
half of
sensitive
a
to it,
cup
or
of
because
coffee.
it's so interesting? It's so interesting. I kind of wish that it had that effect on me, and I bet it would if I quit coffee for long enough. It probably would happen. But I can't bring myself to quit coffee. Like I I I I enjoy it. B, I have this very strange experience that I don't like to be doing nothing with myself. I don't like to I need to have like a cup of water, a cup of seltzer, a cup of coffee, or and then and actually that was the biggest part of the biggest problem in terms of um, when I was trying to quit drinking beer, I would drink an insane amount of decaf coffee instead because I just needed something to do with myself while I was at my desk or while I was just around the house and cleaning up and stuff like that.
Well, this
You
is why
know
you're peeing so much in the middle of the night if you're drinking all this liquid.
that too, dude, that too. But it's better than eating. It's better than like, noshing on everything I see. Think
I
so?
don't
You
know
don't
if I
agree?
agree with that. Depends on what you're eating. I mean,
Right.
definitely drinking like water is definitely healthy. Coffee is healthy
I've also
in
found water to be way
moderation.
better. It clears. I've noticed that it was really good. I used to have a lot of dandruff when I was younger. That was really good for that. I used to have dry skin. Drinking a ton of water has really helped, combat that. I don't
Wait,
really
the
know if
drinking
there's,
water helped with the dandruff?
yeah, big time.
Interesting. Is that a thing for most people?
I don't know.
I've
I
never
don't,
heard that
I would
before,
imagine
but
that it is. I would imagine that it is because it's dandruff. I think because there's two types of dandruff. There's dandruff, and then there's my sibling. One of my siblings has it. I forgot it's called scoliosis. Maybe it's more of like it's actually a dietary reaction. Um, to certain types of foods. My mom actually bought me a book that I refused to read about the things that cause scoliosis. I think it's called scoliosis, uh, and some of the main perpetrators of my favorite stuff. So I refused to read the book, and instead, I think I heard. I don't
you're
remember how it
sure
got
that's
started.
what it's called? I thought that was something completely different.
No, I'm. First of all, I'm not. First of all, I'm not sure that is what it's called. But I do remember hearing the name and thinking that's not what it's called. And then apparently it's a variation of of that disease that I thought it wasn't.
I
So
I I only know psychology stuff, so I'm not one to say, but
yeah, yeah. But I mean, since I was drinking, I probably drink maybe between 8 and 10 water bottles a day. Which is awful in terms of microplastics, I think. Although I can't really keep track of like every single thing that's potentially harmful for me, everything I do. It's exhausting and overwhelming, and I can't keep track of all of it. But I go to Costco and I get the 40 pack of water for $4, and it's 10 cents a bottle. And I'll buy, and my wife and I could easily go through two cases of water a week from Costco.
well, I can tell you
Yeah.
you definitely don't have scoliosis.
What did
I,
you Google
I
it? What
I
is
looked
it?
it up. It is what I thought it was. I didn't want to say it out loud because I
Tell me.
was afraid of sounding. It's like when you have like a curved spine. It's like a musculoskeletal
Oh shoot!
disease.
Right.
That's what I thought it was, but I was like, I don't want to say that that's what it was if it's dandruff.
Yeah. No, but then yeah, I guess I guess that's the S and MS, right? When someone has multiscoliosis, I think that spreads throughout your body. It's not just your spine, right?
Let me see. What is it? What does MS stand? I should
I
know
know.
because my grandma has it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
it's sclerosis. So scoliosis. I don't know. Could be, but
but they're
I
not
mean
connected.
it doesn't affect, it doesn't like curve someone's spine. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 That's a scary disease, dude. I mean, we've been introduced to a lot of really scary neurodegenerative diseases in the last 25, 30 years. I mean, maybe it's existed longer than that. We just haven't had symptoms, like an actual name for it or whatever. But there's a lot of it. I mean, we're actually at the point where some of my dad's older friends are getting a lot of these diseases, and he's really and it's taking a toll on him, like emotionally. Like he's got, like you could tell, like he's getting, like he's starting to think it's becoming more and more relevant to his life. And my grandfather, because I think he said that his mother had Alzheimer's. He's been taking, tons of vitamins and stuff like that, and trying to combat it for years and years and years. And he's 80, I think 6 or 7, and
If he's 86 or 7 and doesn't have signs yet, that's a pretty good.
well, I was gonna say he has pretty bad short-term memory at
Okay,
this point.
so but that's still impressive. If by 87 I don't have full-blown Alzheimer's, I'll be pretty happy. I mean, if I'm
Yeah,
alive at 87, I'll be pretty happy, but
that too, dude.
especially
What he hate
my
he
family has a history of Alzheimer's, so
oh do they?
that's always been a fear.
So
Yeah.
do you keep track of like what of the research that's been going on just in terms of combating it, or you're not even there yet?
I'm not so much there yet because I feel like everything that's said now is going to be completely different in 25 years from now. Um,
Yeah,
but one thing that I have read in the book that I read about sleep is that sleep and Alzheimer's are very hand in hand connected. It's kind of a chicken and the egg thing where they don't know which comes first.
okay.
Um,
You mean a
but
lack
ba
of sleep?
so basically when you sleep, um, one thing that happens is that cerebral spinal fluid um, basically moves through your brain and kind of like rinses out plaque in your brain, from how I understand. Don't take my word from it. Um, but from what I understand, it basically like rinses out your brain of plaque. And what
Yeah.
happens with Alzheimer's is that it attacks the area of your brain that generates sleep first. So
So do
when
people have a hard
you
time sleeping if you have Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so you'll have a hard time sleeping. Could be an early sign of Alzheimer's potentially. I mean, it could be a billion other things, so don't think it's that first, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's like a vicious cycle that you get worse sleep, so it doesn't rinse it out as well, and then the plaque builds up, and then it deteriorates more of your brain. You have harder time sleeping, and they don't know which comes first. Like, is it that you weren't sleeping well so that the plaque was building up? And then that was causing you to sleep worse, or was it the plaque started building, that's why you're not sleeping well, and that's
yeah, and that's what
like
causes
they don't know
disease. Yeah,
which one came first. But if theoretically like there was a way to improve generating sleep even when like the first signs of Alzheimer's shows up, then and they're looking at this through different ways of stimulating the brain. Um, to basically get that rinsing system back up and running even after like the disease progression has started and it's affecting your sleep. So kind of like
huh.
break that cycle. That's one of the things that they talked about in the Matthew Walker book of sleep that I was reading.
I got to read the book, by the way, because we talked about this a little bit last time we talked, but I listened to I think 2 or 3 of his episodes with Huberman, and and I it's so relieving for me. It's such a wonder. I always thought that I was I was bad at science, and the truth is, it doesn't really come supernatural to me, but there's so many good educators out there, and
Yeah.
I never, so when I was growing up, I always thought that I was awful at math. And the truth is that I'm not awful at it, but it doesn't come naturally to me like the way it kind of clicks for a lot of people. like the way, like my dad is very, very good at simple math, but quick basic math, right? So if I'm like, oh, I want to buy these pants at 30% off, he'll tell me in a blink. He doesn't have to like he just like the way his brain works. He just is very quick to process. 30% off $50 pants, right? Um, and
$35.
yeah, no,
No, I
your
made that
pant.
up.
Oh yeah. Well, so the way that I
No,
do,
it'd
the way
be
that I
14.50, I think.
right. So the way that
I
I
mean
do it,
42.50.
I start. I basically just think about what 10% is and multiply it by whatever number I was thinking of, right? So if the pants are 50
Yeah.
or 30% off and they're $50, then I just think
Oh no, so it would be
10%.
35. Yeah. I thought you
Maybe
said
15.
15%. Yeah, no,
Oh well,
$15 off is $35.
35. $15 off is 35% off, and then $35 off would be 75% off.
Oh no, I thought you were saying 30% off of $50.
Yeah, that's $15.
Yeah, so 50 minus 15 is 35.
Oh yes, the pants cost $35. Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. So
So so
you
so
made me doubt
so he
myself.
he did not he did not need to have this whole conversation. My dad's really good at that, right? And when I took the SATs for the first time, I believe I don't recall exactly, but I believe I got a 410 or a 420 on the SAT, on the math section at
Unlike the
least.
math. Okay, yeah. I was gonna say total. I think if you just write your name, then you
No,
get.
no, no, no. And the truth is, I didn't even do so well on the English part either. I don't think my brain kind of works with standardized testing, but I definitely did extremely poorly at the math section. And again, and my friend Jason Fishman growing up, he part of what I always knew was brilliant about him, aside from the fact that he was a really smart person, was that he was incredible at breaking it down and teaching it in a really simple way that was accessible to everyone. And and so
That's how
he
you
would
know that you know it.
yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah.
he would so he actually tutored me for the math SATs. He'd come over, 2, 3 times a week and we'd go through it. And my practice test, it's funny, I actually never took them again because I came to the SATs with the wrong paperwork and they wouldn't let me in. Which happened to me twice in my life. It happened also with my license. When I was taking my license test, I brought the wrong paperwork. They wouldn't let me take it either, and had to reschedule it for like a month later,
That
which felt like the end
sucks.
of the world when I was
Yeah,
18.
100%.
But but I was taking practice tests and getting in the mid 600s just from learning with him, and I was like, really, maybe I'm not so bad at this. Maybe it's just the way I'm being presented this information. And Matt Walker was listening to him on Huberman. He has a couple of guests, or a lot of guests, really. A lot of his guests make learning such a pleasant and accessible experience, and so much more digestible. And all this material, if I was sitting in a classroom, I would never get it. And for a while, I would take notes on Huberman podcasts. Like I'd find ones that I thought were interesting and that were important for me to learn and important for me to like. I felt was important to process and like know for myself and for my family. And I would actually listen and take notes on his podcast, which I was like treating myself. I was treating it like it was a class, and I was able to just take in so much more information just based on the presentation. It's crazy.
See, I am a very big believer that anyone can learn anything if you have the right teacher and start in the right place. Like, I feel like a lot of people give up and think that they can't do things and that they're dumb because people just don't either know how to teach them or like start
Yeah,
beyond where they should be.
yeah, yeah. And
Like I've experienced that. Like I
with what?
consider myself a pretty smart person, but like there were plenty of times where I was like, this teacher is just not like I'm sure if they explained it in a different way. Like for chemistry, I took a chemistry class in high school and that was my worst class ever. Geometry was a near second, but geometry I figured out in the end. Chemistry never figured out. But I feel like a lot of it was because the teacher was just not the teacher for me, and they were not like there was some disconnect. They were not like meeting me where I was. They were starting a couple of steps beyond where I needed them to
Yeah,
start.
yeah. So it's funny that out of the five or six classes that I taught in my life, um, excuse me, out of the five or six classes that I taught in my life, there's only one time where I wanted a kid to change his to change the track and leave my class, and not because of, and literally the reason why was because I was like, it's just not fair to the place that he's coming from in terms of his grasp of the English language and comprehension and just his communication skills. I was like, I know this kid is not dumb. I know he's a really smart person. I was like, but the starting point is so far off from the rest of the class. I was like, I wouldn't be able to get to teach him. I actually tried explaining this to his parents, and his parents wouldn't hear it. Unfortunately, I was really, and and they kept on asking me, "What's he doing wrong? What's he doing wrong?" Like he's not doing anything wrong, and not even that. I really like having him in the class. I like him as a person. I think he's really really sweet. He's a good presence in the classroom, and he participates. I was like, he's just so far from where everyone else is that I can't I'm doing him a disservice by having him stick around with these kids that are on a different level, because he's going to feel frustrated and lost and stuck and give up. And it's like it's not to his benefit to be in the class. Like and because I've been in that situation so many times where I didn't get it, and I would shut myself off because I was like, oh, I can't keep up with this class. I'm not smart enough, or
Yeah, I mean, you
I'm
might
just
as well shut yourself off because you're not going to get what they're saying because you don't like understand the building blocks to get to that point.
yeah. Yeah, and one thing I was really proud of in terms of my grading was I would really grade. It's funny, I would grade everyone based on the progress that they were making, especially, and it's probably easier to do with an English class than it is to do with something that's a little bit more grounded in like science or history or something a little bit more objective.
Yeah.
Um, but I would, but so everyone would hand in a paper. I would do a bunch of writing exercises at the beginning of beginning of the year to get a feel where everyone was. It would be writing, public speaking, and comprehension, and I would give everyone a grade based on first of all, what they handed in, how much effort I felt like they were actually putting into the assignment, and how seriously they were taking it or not. And then, but if a month later, 6 months later, their writing quality was the same and they handed in exactly same, or their speaking, public speaking was the same, and I would give them a lower grade than they initially got, because I was like, this is supposed to be progress, and this is supposed to be time invested in growing and developing your skills. And I don't care. I'm not on a scale from 1 to 10. I don't expect you to be a 10 out of 10 writer. I was like, but if you're going to start as a 2, then by the end of the year, if you're not a 4 or a 5, then it shows that you're not putting a lot of effort in, especially because I I I would go out of my way to keep the classes relevant and engaging. And I would actually I would ask the students what they wanted to learn about, and then come up with material based on what the class consensus was. So we would take 2 weeks. We had like a fun section with conspiracy theories, which was a ton of fun, where we'd observe different conspiracy theories, and we'd and then we'd learn about them, and then we'd learn what arguments to make, for or against it, and then you'd have to ultimately, either do a presentation or write something or express, why you believe it, or why you don't believe it. Bless you.
Thank you.
Um, and 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 like everyone, almost everyone did really really well on that, and that's where I saw some of everyone's peak writing. Because I was like, this is something that they're actively interested in. But again, if the quality of your 5 minute public speech in front of the class is the same the first month of school as it is the last month of school, then you're going to start off with an A and end off with a C, with the same, because obviously there's a disconnect over there, you know.
Yeah. And one of the other things that I've noticed, especially just like reading psychology articles and things like that, is that all these things can be much more understandable. Like you said, just like on how they're presented. Like some people are just great educators, and I think a lot of that comes from just like one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people write, especially in psychology articles, and that may be because the audience they're writing for isn't like beginner levels, they're more experts. So there are many reasons
Hmm.
why, but write in very like abstract terms. And like
Right.
I hate when textbooks like write in abstract terms, and I'm just like, if you just gave a concrete example here, like 10 times as many people would understand what you're talking
Sure.
about, and they'd
Sure.
understand it 10 times faster if you just like took a second, took two sentences, and broke down the abstract like concept in a very concrete example. Like the power of concrete examples for learning, I think, is very
Yeah. Well,
underrated
because
and
we're
underused.
we're story. I think that's why a lot of religion is based on story too, because we're story oriented and story thinking animals, and we look for application and relevancy in the way that we learn. What do you, I'm very curious as to your thoughts on on this though. Actually, now we're talking about this. One of the things I've been and I actually I haven't done as good of a job in the past couple of years as I would like to in the future. But one of the things I became aware of when it came to working on my students' writing and my own writing is
Yeah,
actually breaking down the way that the words lay on the page and come out on the page. Because I think that when we look at it, when we look at a page, we look at an essay, we look at an assignment, we look at a poem, right? The first thing that I think the first test or the first gauge that, or the that we determine as to whether the information is going to be relevant is how accessible does the information look to us immediately or not. And if it's just pages of single space, no breaks in paragraph and one enormously long paragraph of just that's 2 pages long, that will
yeah,
read very differently, not even read differently, but you, at least me, I will not be able to comprehend all the information or process all the information on the page because I get tired looking at all these words without a break and all these concepts in just a giant. I consider all lumped together, and I think this is too
yeah,
much information for me to process at one time. And then if I have, as opposed to having several shorter paragraphs or even a bunch of different lines, I was like, and one of the things I was trying to tell my students in poetry, and even with essays, I didn't really even mind, was I was like, you don't have to stick with a four. I was like, if you're writing a one-page story, a creative story, I was like, you can have a one-sentence paragraph for all I care. You can and then double space it, and then have another, and then have another, and then go have a 2 or 3 sentence paragraph. I was like, but it's so important to be able to look at a page for yourself and for the reader, as a reader, to look at a page and say, is this digestible or is this overwhelming for me?
yeah. No, definitely, I think something any writer should look at is how their page looks. But I do think that there are situations where you want blockier text, like when you have like stories for young adults, it's gonna be a little more spaced out than for adults. And when you have like very academic scholarly writing, it's gonna be much more stuffy
Yeah, but
than
don't you think
like a
that it would
fiction book.
serve, it would be better served for, and again, if the academic writing is not for everyone, then I get it. But it would serve to be much more accessible. Your research is much more accessible, your paper is much more accessible if it's broken down in much more in almost like bite-sized, non-intimidating. Because the content might not be intimidating once you actually get into it. But even just that initial looking at the page, and then when you process it, oh my God, there's just so much to look at, there's so much to read, and then you're like, oh wait, I could read this book. I mean, I found that actually to be the case. I really, 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 really enjoyed the Elon Musk biography by Walter Isaacson, right? And I
I've
enjoyed it for the
seen that book, but I've never read it.
right. So what I say, there's two things. Obviously, the content is great and the writing is great. But what I really, really loved about the book is that out of, let's say, 700 pages, there's probably 70, 80 chapters, or more. and some chapters are literally just a page or two long. And so there's a very clear, it's very concisely written in the sense where you look at it and you're not intimidated. Like if I look at a book and I see, oh my God, chapter one is page 1 to 50, I'm like, oh, forget it. I don't know how to, I can't read that, you know. But chapter one is 1 to page 4. I'm like, you know what? Let me read a chapter right now,
Yeah,
and I'll take it, and you know, and then before I know it, I'll have read 5, 10 chapters, and I may have read the equivalent to 50 pages. But to me, it felt like I was getting that break that I needed to, yeah, and it's got to be all mental, but it's just a very curious phenomenon. And so I think Walter Isaacson did an incredible job breaking down the story of Elon Musk's life into like you could really pick up that book and put it back down 10, 15 times a day and read 10, 15 different chapters in those in those 3 to 5 minute sittings, you know, which I think is really cool.
yeah. I think the master of that is if you've ever read a James Patterson book. I
Mm,
haven't read one in a while, but have a distinct memory of when I was younger. Um, on a series of Shabbats, like picking up. He wrote one young adult. He may have written more young adult series since then, but he wrote one young adult series called Maximum Ride, and
okay.
like I don't know if I've ever devoured books as quickly as those books because they were written just like you said, like 3 to maybe 5 pages was the longest chapter in the book, like, and every chapter somehow ended on a cliffhanger. Like
Yeah, that's
you
definitely an
couldn't
art in
put the book
itself.
down. Yeah. And it was
By the
like,
way, in Hollywood, they call that hack writing.
yeah, no. So that's what I was gonna say. Like, it definitely depends on your audience, which format is better. Like, definitely a more academic audience is gonna look at a book like with 3 page chapters and be like, this isn't serious writing, and whether like that should change or not because it's just the better way in
It's a
general,
silly
I don't know,
stigma. It's a
but
silly stigma, I think, for a large part.
it may be, but I don't know enough to say. I don't know the arguments for the other
Like
side.
you
I
could,
don't know
and
enough to
also
say.
by the way, the difference between with having a cliffhanger every episode is that it just really means that it just really means that you're good at building suspense. Like that's really all it. That's really all it is because you don't even necessarily have to even like come up with some whole incredible, you know, grandiose end to every episode. It's just you have to build up enough stakes that keeps you hooked. When Rachel and I were watching, I think it was The Punisher, which remains to today one of my favorite limited TV series, and I'm so excited that Marvel is actually bringing John Bernthal back because I think that he was an incredible Punisher. Um, but what my wife and I would do was we'd watch the end of an episode that would inevitably end on a cliffhanger, and um,
Watch the
and
first
then
5 episodes of the next one.
no, well, then we'd watch the first 5 minutes of the next episode, and that tended to resolve everything, you
That's what I
know, and
meant,
so
minutes.
yeah, exactly. You know, and it was, and then so we'd be, so you know, so we would be in bed, and it would be like the episode's like ending, and you're like, and your heart's pumping, and you're like, oh my God, I gotta know what happens. And then we start the first 3 minutes of the next episode. Um, and it's actually funny because I actually think this is my wife's serial killer trait, but she has no problem with a show being 3 to 5 minutes of the episode being over, and just pausing the computer and going to bed, or turning off the TV and going to bed. Like, there's 2 minutes left in the episode. How in the world do you like? Why are you turning it off now? She's like, I don't know, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I'm like, do you not have any kind of investment in like what's happening right now? But apparently she doesn't. Um,
I thought you were gonna
appar-
say she looks up endings.
no, I do that
That would be
sometimes. I did that. I
worse.
think I did that with
No,
Lost.
that's I haven't seen Lost, but
Yeah,
no,
because
I
you know
hate
why?
I
Because
hate.
it had like 10 or 12 seasons, something crazy like that, and I didn't. It had a lot of seasons, and I didn't want to get invested because I heard that the ending wasn't so great, so I didn't want to get invested. So I looked up what the ending was, and I was like, ah, this show sucks, and I just didn't watch it.
I
But
I've
yeah,
heard infamous things about the Lost ending.
yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's cut this off now because I gotta run. Um, we will do this again soon. Pencil me in for in 3 weeks and 2 days from now. For your next availability your next available date. And
I'm honestly not that busy. I don't know. I just like having things scheduled out.
yeah, no problem, dude. Anyway, I really appreciate this is a lot of fun. I love doing this with you, man. Um, this is our new writing session, something like that.
Well,
I
next
think.
time we have to talk about writing more.
Definitely.
And
I've
somehow we didn't talk about Deadpool and Wolverine this whole time.
wait. What'd you think of it?
I thought it was good, but not
On a
like
scale from 1 to 10.
amazing.
On a scale from 1 to
I
100. I
I
don't like 1 to
I'd
10. 1 to 100.
1 to 100. I'd give it like a 76.
Okay. Did you watch it in a packed theater?
No, so I waited until after Tisha
Hmm.
B'av.
Yeah. So you probably waited 3 weeks till after opening.
Yeah,
Um, dude, I think that if you watch that movie within the first week that it came out,
that's
you
how I
would
like
probably
to
give
do
it an
it
85.
usually.
You'd probably give it an 85 because I think that the experience that you get from that crowd, participating in that shared audience and that shared excitement and enthusiasm and all the twists and all the jokes and all the, whatever. It brings it to life to you so much more. I watched it twice. I watched it the week it came out, and then I watched it with my friend a week ago, and it was. And I have no problem watching movies, over and over, and still loving them. But there was a very tangible difference between the way that these lines or setups would hit, and it's actually cool. I mean, we'll discuss this next time too for sure. But a big part of acting is knowing that you're setting something up and giving and performing that line, knowing that there's going to be an audience at home in 20 years from now waiting to see what happens, and then you're flourishing it because you know that at any point in the future someone's looking at this and you're giving that moment the attention it deserves. And it's a really cool part of acting that's a little cheesy, but it's really interesting psychologically how that works out.
I'm a big plot guy, so I base it a lot on the plot. Like even Spider-Man, the latest one I saw
Yeah,
in
No Way Home.
theaters. I saw it with like everyone in theaters, which was very cool. It was a great experience, especially that movie. I think, other than maybe Infinity Wars, which I didn't unfortunately see opening night,
Yeah.
but probably I can imagine a similar
Yeah,
feeling.
dude.
But I still like. I'm very big on plot. I think No Way Home didn't have the. I thought there were a lot of plot holes, and it wasn't the strongest plot. I feel like the same for this one. Not that there were, I don't know, plot holes, but just like a weak. It could have been a stronger plot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I think is fun about what they did with the plot and the writing was how much they would break the fourth wall, and like he's got like he exists half in our world, half in his, and so it kind of makes it hard to really make a believable fake universe when you keep on acknowledging things that are happening in the real world.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's call it there, dude. I gotta run.
Yeah.
But thank you. We'll be in touch. Have a great night, dude. And I love talking to you, man. I'll catch you
Okay.
soon.
Same
All right.
here. You too. Have a good night.
All right. Bye, everyone.